In this episode, I have a chat with Adept Austin from the Discord as he introduces me to the heart of role-playing and how GMs and players can introduce it to their sessions. Welcome to the Mythras Matters podcast, Season 1, Episode 74, The Heart of Role-Playing with Adept Austin. Hello and welcome to Mythras Matters, a podcast dedicated to the Mythras rule set and all its supplements. As always, I am your host, Inwils, and welcome to October. Right, I have to be honest straight from the start, and I was tempted to split this month's episode into two parts. But at the last minute, I decided against it, mainly because it's not something that I usually do. So this is a long episode. I think it's about an hour long, but the content is excellent. So without further ado, let's get straight on with it. And I'll let this month's inspiring guest introduce themselves.
All right, hey guys. I'm Adept Austin. I'm the newest mod on the Mythras Discord server. That's where you'll find me the easiest. I'm on a couple YouTube channels that every now and then I'll just pop in, but I don't have anyone for myself. So if you need to find me, go find me on the Mythras Discord. If you're not in it already, just jump in. It's a great time.
Yeah. And what's your experience with role-playing games?
So I started fairly late. I started in the, COVID times, 2020 with D&D 5th edition. I played that for a bit. And then I've also played Call of Cthulhu and a couple other systems. But I really enjoy Mythras. I've really been enjoying it, mainly for the toolbox approach, the free form. I don't have to feel like, okay, well, I want it to work this way, but there's also this spell,
Yes. Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
have a spell.
Yeah. And are you mainly a player or a GM?
Oh, it's a very full-time GM type thing, but there are some things where I do with some friends called a no prep challenge, where there's no prep at all. You don't even know, like, you literally roll a die to see who's going to be the game master. You roll a die to see what the setting's going to be, and then maybe if you feel like it, you can roll a die to see kind of the feel, like the tone. And then you just go from there.
Do you know, we often need, when the full group can't get together, some of us can. And I love that idea to be just roll the die and see what comes up. Yeah. I'm going to use that in the future. So I was really intrigued by your topic and also very excited about it because on the PDF you sent me, it was about the heart of role playing. So tell me a bit about that. What do you consider to be the heart of role playing?
Yeah, so the heart of role playing, and maybe more accurately, the heart of role playing games, is what makes them different. Like, you can watch a movie and have a story told to you. You can play a video game and sort of live out, that action type thing. But being able to role play in a tabletop RPG allows you to focus beyond mechanics and dice rolls and really focus on the connection to your character and the other characters that are there. That, as long as you're really truly focused on that, a miraculous story will happen no matter what.
So really that role play element of the games, that's what we're focusing in. And you have a term that you use called in-character role play. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an extreme shift than I think a lot of the hobby has, but in character means you're focused in character in terms of like if I want to define that, you're seeing the world through your character's eyes. So that's very far removed from I know a lot of people use VTTs to see like a top-down view, and it's
Yeah.
fine to have those to help you kind of like okay, this is happening there, this is happening there, but you see it through your character's eyes, which really limits the scope. And then as well with that, you're kind of overriding your own thought process with the thought process of your character. So like me, I live in the 21st century. I understand things about physics and chemistry, but if I'm role playing a peasant in
Yeah.
medieval times, I'm like, oh yes, the water falls because the god says it. So
Yeah. Very much
there are
so.
things like
Yeah.
that. And
And
then,
it's, yeah,
sorry
go
to
on.
interrupt, but a real big thing, and it's a real big shift, is in our games, we try to maximize in-character speaking. So instead of asking the games master, is the door locked? I will just say, I try the handle on the door. And that's not speaking in character, but I'm moving my character instead of just asking the sky.
Oh, I see. So rather than addressing the GM, the
Mhm.
question's actually almost like telling them what your character will be doing. Is that correct? Yeah.
Exactly. So if I want more information, I act in character. How would I get that information? Like if I'm in a library, instead of asking the GM, are there any books like this? I would just say, I walk to the science fiction section and search the shelves.
So I really like that element of it, and I really like the idea of being the character. So do I have to sort of like put on voices and sort of like engage in lots of discussion,
Yeah,
or is it
great question.
yeah.
So with voices, I would say they are not required at all, like 0%. I actually find voices are more useful when you're playing a games where you are having that out of character discussion because it really differentiates between this is my question to the game master or that other player versus this is my character speaking. But when you really focus on that in-character speaking only and in-character action only, you actually don't need a voice at all. Not to say I don't love me some good voices. I'm a
Yeah.
horrible voice actor.
I think we
But
all are.
if I try to put on an accent, it will quickly sway between like English to Australian to Texan to, and it won't. None of it will be accurate.
No, I go from pirate to farmer and backward. That's so. What about NPCs? Because we're both GMs. So is it a case that NPCs can see the world differently when we're actually acting them out?
Yeah, so with the NPCs, I think it's actually it is more difficult as a game master because if you have multiple NPCs in a scene, as it were, then you have to be switching. How am I thinking that this person thinks? How am I thinking like this person thinks? But with practice, it becomes more natural, and you'll find that since you're focused more on that in character, what can the characters see? What can they smell? Not like, oh, well, they shuffle in their chair and they seem to be thinking of other things. It's like, that's not how I would describe it. I would just say their gaze wanders off and they sit in their chair quietly. Like it's up to the players and by extension their characters to figure out what that means, you know?
Yeah.
And
It,
so you don't really need voices with NPCs either, although I will say it's more useful for NPCs because you could have multiple NPCs in a scene and you as a GM, instead of having to describe which person is talking every single time, the voice will help differentiate that, but not required at all.
yeah, I totally agree with that. And just thinking about one of the groups that I have going at the moment, there's sort of like three people in the tavern. It was a lot easier for me to differentiate between those NPCs talking by just adapting my voice, and sort of like changing back to my normal voice when it's more GM talk. I was just thinking there, I love to write fiction, and one of the golden rules of fiction is, and I think this is, it's almost like show rather than tell. Is that something that you would bring into the in-character role play?
Yeah, the show don't tell is very powerful. So in character, it's very difficult to do on the fly, because sometimes I can get very lazy with my descriptions. And sometimes it'd be easier to say, "Oh, he walks in a menacing way," he walks evilly, but it really it kind of cheapens the description of other things when you just kind of take those sorts of shortcuts. Not that it's bad. Saying something like that is, I would say, a step up than saying, "Oh, they walk down the corridor." You can tell that they're evil. Like that's that's not very doesn't really let role play flow.
And is this something that you think stands apart from combat, or do you think it's something that's quite integral to it?
Great question. I think a lot of people say, role play doesn't stop when combat starts. But a lot of people, if you watch their games, it can feel like, there is something different. They're still trying to role play, but a lot of the actions happening are like, okay, they're very different than they would be out of that combat. But if you just, do the exact same thing you would do when you're not in combat, but just in combat, it actually doesn't change that much. So one thing that I focus on, and I tell my players, and I tell them to keep me accountable as well, is when you take a turn, whether it's in combat or outside of combat, you just say where you are, what you're doing, and then if your character says something, then just say that. And so if I'm, at a tavern, right? Very common. I sit down at the bar, I shuffle my bar stool, I wave my hand, and I call for the barkeep. Barkeep, I need a drink. That's a turn. And then in combat, even though it's still combat, I can say the same tavern, right? Someone walks in and they're mean mugging me. It's like, and the fight has already started. It's like I charge at the braggart and tackle him.
Yeah.
I don't say anything. You can see kind of where I am, what I'm doing, and then after that, the GM can ask for the roll. And then if you've been playing for a long time, you kind of already know what to roll as well.
Yeah. So almost like, because I must admit, I tend to do the rolls, and then the players tend to describe the action.
That's good.
Because sometimes the roll might fail, and so they can interpret that into their own action. And we're a strong believer of the dice tell the story.
Exactly.
Because sometimes, they fail, and that fail is actually creating a story. As we go around. Now, I do have one question that I need to ask you at this point. That's not on the list, so be warned.
No problem.
So I have a real bugbear about puzzles in dungeons or whatever. And my real bugbear about it is I don't think players should solve puzzles. I always think characters should solve puzzles. So I don't know if you know the conflict pool mechanic from M-Space, or I tend to use that a lot because I want that character that has that high intelligence score or is really familiar with runes to figure out the puzzle rather than the player doing it. So where do you stand on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in terms of like puzzles, generally when people put them into a game, it's almost like you're saying they're challenging the players, not the characters. And so when you're playing in a fashion that's really focused on in-character roleplay, if you have, to use some more sort of a D&D isms, if you have the low intelligence barbarian, and even if the player knows the answer, if they're playing in character, they're not going to blurt it out, right? They might, find a way think of a way for the dumb barbarian to stumble on something, like say they realize this rune is maybe the right answer, right? They may accidentally bump the wizard onto it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But they won't they won't just be blurting out, it's like, oh well, by my calculations.
Yes. Exactly. So they're staying in their character, and I think that's almost like the sign of a good role player who can totally invest and be their character. I love that idea. So for people who are listening in and thinking, I really want to implement this, what do you think are the benefits of this in character role playing?
So the benefit is, first of all, it's a lot easier to become immersed in the world because you're seeing it through your character's eyes. You're experiencing it through your character's actions as opposed to you asking questions to the GM. So it really increases that and makes it easier to get to that sort of flow state. And a lot of times it will cut down on sort of, I guess, playing 20 questions with the GM. So
Yeah.
it increases the pace of the gameplay. If you're a common example is when there's a menacing door at the end of the hallway. It's very tempting for players, whether you've only play or whether you're a GM. Maybe it's sometimes more tempting if you've GM'd before. He's like, oh, this is probably a trap, right? To ask 5 million questions like, oh, what if I did this? What if I did that? Kind of like test driving your actions. Say like, if I did this, would this happen or would this happen? And if you just say, pause there as the game's like, well, just try something. It's okay to like pause that in character and say, in character, what are you doing? How are you going to find out what will happen? Because, I can't just stare at a door and figure out, well, if I did this, this would happen, or this would happen, or that one, So those are the biggest things, is it increases the immersion, but also increases the pacing. Whether you are looking for a fast or slow paced game, the fast paced story beats, as it were, that just naturally happen, like combat, they will feel fast because you're acting in that same vein. And then the slow times, like I've myself have complained where it's like, oh, is this the shopping episode? Like, I don't want to be here right now. But when you're in character, you can sort of find the beauty in the slower paced times, whether that's a shopping episode or, going down a dark tunnel trying to not freak out.
No, I really like that. And I think sometimes I was just thinking about the menacing door, or when as GMs we talk about the room appears empty or something like that. And it'll be really interesting to see how players in character react to that rather than players themselves reacting to that. Do you find that it encourages players to think about their character skills, the specific skills they've got and how they can implement those?
Yeah, so in terms of your skills, which, as an aside, I love the skill-based nature of Mythras so much more than some other games. But the skills really will inform the player, kind of what their character is usually thinking about, what is their go-to tactics. But if you are playing, in character, you're not going to be going through a room and then it's like, you know what, let me look at my skill list and figure out, okay, I'm good at this. How can I twist this to try and find a way to make this skill fit? Because I'm good at this skill. You can skip past all that, skip sort of past that gaminess aspect, which is fine. TTRPGs are a game for sure. But kind of move past that sort of pause in the moment and just say, you know what, my character would probably do this, even though that might not be their best skill, because it's the most natural action, right? And another thing I wanted to bring up is when you have this in-character thing going on, the GM actually has to do a lot less work. That's a huge benefit because you don't have to move around the characters or tell them what they're feeling. They're in charge of doing that. And it
Right.
makes it more
Yeah.
dynamic and active for the players because they don't have to sit there and just wait for the GM to ask them to roll some more dice. They have to make those dice rolls happen by moving in the world.
Yeah. And that leads to the skill rolls or what skill is being rolled rather than specifically saying, I would like to use this skill to
Exactly.
do that.
Mhm.
Well, where do passions come into this? Because passions are a wonderful mechanic in Mythras. Where do you see passions coming into in-character role playing?
Yeah, so I actually had there was an interesting discussion just recently on the Mythras Discord, like how do you handle passions? How often do you let them be used to augment skills or things like that? If I'm playing, like let's say not augmentation, let's just say a passion, I will
Yeah,
just roll my passion, and if I fail, then I'll act against the passion. If I succeed, then I'll act with the passion. I
yeah,
won't really talk to the GM at all about that. And I tell my players they can do that because it's almost like a reaction roll in like older RPGs where it's like, I'm not sure how this would happen. I'm not quite sure what my character would do. So I'm going to roll the dice to see what they would do.
yeah,
Um, and then in terms of augmentation, I just let all my players augment however much they want. I don't even
yeah,
ask them to tell them or to tell me. They'll just describe it in their action. And if it's a passion, maybe they'll describe sort of that passion coming into effect, but they don't really necessarily have to because it is sort of like, how would I know that, oh, my buddy over here, he's really, gun ho about it because, he loves his sister or something. Like I wouldn't know
yeah.
that.
You
But
got, yeah. I like the idea that letting passions control outcomes. I think that's really powerful. And a lot of my players will say, well, I don't know how my character would react in this situation, so I'll
mhm,
roll my passion to go one way or another. It's interesting when you're talking about augmentation because a lot of the time as a GM, promote that and
mhm.
say you can. But some of the good players will actually say, I would like to augment it with this, and they sort of like give me a reason for it.
Mhm.
I, do when they're in character, do you find that players sort of like want to steal the spotlight and want to be, do all this description, all this showing, and end it up being a one person show when everybody else is just sort of like sat there waiting for their turn?
Yeah, I would say there is sometimes a danger of that spotlighting happening, but in the games that I run and that I play in, we actually, it's kind of strange. We kind of always go in a sort of round robin order, to keep it in character. For example, say, I'm trying to pick this lock and it's going to take a couple minutes, right? Maybe 2, 3 minutes. If I just describe picking this lock this whole time and the other characters just kind of disappear, then it kind of breaks up the verisimilitude, breaks up the
Yeah,
fantasy a little bit. So if you always go in sort of that kind of order, it's like, okay, I'm picking the lock, trying to hear the tumblers, and then it just goes to I'll roll, right? But it's gonna go to the next person.
yes,
The next person would come up, even if there's nothing for them to do. They're bored, maybe there's like really heavily armored guy. He's like, picking locks. That's for wimps.
yeah,
He's just like,
yeah,
I lean against the wall, cross my arms, waiting for him to finish.
yeah. And that really allows players not to react to something that is happening, if that makes sense, in the sense
Mhm.
that they are actually doing things while that trap is trying to be disarmed,
Exactly.
rather than waiting and then once it's fired, then acting. I like that it's almost like trying to get into your head that everything is happening at the same time, and
Mhm.
everybody's got these actions. So say, for example, I'm a GM. How is it best to encourage or maximize this in character role playing in my game? What steps or what encouragement would you give me?
Yeah, so I would say first thing first is don't ambush your players with this new style. Be like, all right, guys, tonight we're doing this.
Yeah.
Talk to them first. Let them know it's like, hey guys, I've heard of this new style. I want to try and get more in-character roleplay going. Talk to them about it. Let them know, and then nothing goes when you're ever doing anything new. It's never going to go
Mm.
perfectly, right? And so you don't have to maximize like, oh, 100% in character. I only talk in character. Who's Adept Austin?
Yes.
I don't know
Yeah.
that guy. But what you can do is sort of give the players some more time um, to figure out what they're doing. You don't actually need to talk as much.
Mm.
Give them that room, instead of saying, "Oh, a really scary bugbear comes around the corner." You can just say, "A bugbear comes around the corner, towering over you." They can
Mm.
choose whether to be scared or not, all right? Unless there
Yeah.
is some sort of effect coming into play, right? If there's like five people at the table, including the GM, right? Then you should, I mean, if you think about it, the GM is just one player at that table. You should
Mm.
probably not be taking up, I mean, 50%, 80% of the time. If you try to like equal that out a little bit, you would be surprised at how much of the time a player will do something, and you don't actually have to say anything as a GM. It'll just
Yeah.
naturally go to the next player, and you can just sit there for a while and not say
Yeah.
anything. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
and then another thing, this is actually very important, is it's very important not to re-narrate what your character or what your players have already narrated. So
Mm.
I know I know great descriptor Matt Mercer is so good as his descriptions. It's like they're amazing. But if you notice, like in his games, someone will do something. Sometimes they'll just say, what's happening in the room?" Or they'll just say, very like bland, like out of character, like I just want to perception the room, as it were, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but if they describe something, very nicely, it's like I charge into the crowd and thrust my spear into the first goblin I see, then Matt Mercer will describe it in, yes, a much more eloquent way, very grandiose. But if you don't do that, not only will your players get better at describing things, but it will also let them have more talking time, have more game
Mm.
time, and they'll have more ownership over their characters' actions.
I actually think I'm guilty of this.
I'm guilty of it.
I really do think a lot of times players describe something and then I almost like re-narrate it and sort of like I don't try to improve it. I just sort of like redo it as if
Yeah.
I need to, but it's true. I don't need to actually re-narrate it at
Mhm.
all. You know,
And
it's good where it stands. Yeah.
I think that the main thing, and this is kind of also something you should talk to your players about, is that in a lot of tables, it's kind of like if the GM didn't say it, it's not really real, right? The GM
Mm,
is the complete master of the world. But that's true, you're the master of the world, but the players are the master of their characters. And
yeah.
so if you just let your players know, it's like, hey, if you say your character did this, then as long as the dice didn't disagree with you, then they did it. So
Yeah.
you don't have to re-narrate that. And that actually does, like I was saying earlier, it cuts down on a lot of the, I guess, lag and delay in the flow and the pacing of the game.
Mm. And like you say, the more they do their own narration, the better they're going to become at doing it.
Exactly. And they'll have fun.
Yeah, rather than just waiting, for the GM to redo it. Okay, any other points to GMs who would like to encourage this?
Yes. So I have a lot of points, so I'm gonna try and get through them
Okay.
real quick. So sort of along with that, just because the GM didn't say it doesn't mean it's not true. The players control their characters, and what they do has to stand. So if you avoid like I know, sometimes you're running a module. I'm running oh, what is it? The Miros one. Oh goodness, Miros Doomed, Miros Falling. I can't remember what it's called, but the module goes in a certain direction, but my player that I was playing with didn't follow it at all. And you have to
Right.
be fine with that as a GM
Yeah.
and avoid trying to like, well, let me get this back on track, which is kind of, that phrase back on track kind of leads you directly to on the railroad track, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Completely. Yeah.
So embrace those curveballs, embrace the spontaneity of it. Even if what the players do is not perfect, just relax and just like, you know what, I'm not as prepared as maybe I would be for this sort of situation. Not every single session needs to be an absolute, 10 out of 10 banger. It's okay to have like, okay, this was not maybe my best session, but the more you do that, the better you'll be at improv, and
Yeah.
because you're so much better at that, it will give your players, more, I guess, rope, more freedom to make those in-character actions without feeling, because I've played in a couple games and I've tell me if you felt the same way before, but it's like, my character would do this, but I'm pretty sure the game master hasn't prepared for that. I'm pretty sure he has a story prepared to go in this direction, so I'm going to do this instead.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so, yeah.
I have to be careful because my only three GMs that I've only played for three people. When Lawrence Whitaker was the GM, and then Dan True, and recently Mike Lorrimore. And I've only
Wow.
there have been so.
Mount
But
Rushmore.
yeah, I know what you mean, and I think a lot of the times, especially new GMs, almost like over prepare. They almost like they write down exactly how the players need to get to this point, rather than saying, "Okay, this is where the clue is," or "This is the information they can get," and then thinking, let them, decide where they're going or how to get it, rather than say, no, let's steer you back onto a railroad track that is actually predetermined. And I must admit, if I was a player and that happened, I would feel almost like straitjacketed into,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this is what I have to do, which is not a nice feeling. Okay.
Yeah.
You had more. Give me
Yes.
more. Yeah.
So I think one of the reasons you're talking about preparing so much is that us as GMs kind of feel like we need to impress our players. We're the arbiter of how much fun is going to happen in this game. So, if there's not fun happening, it's our fault. But if you kind of leave that sort of thought process behind, your players are not an audience. They're hopefully your friends.
Yes. Yeah.
They want you to succeed. They all want to have fun too. And so placing the capability in their hands to also, hey, this will be a fun session because we're all going to work together to make it a fun session.
I like that.
Don't respond to your players' actions, not questions. If they ask you, is the door locked, like I was saying earlier, just instead, you can just stare at them, or you can say, what are you doing to figure that out, right? And that's one thing,
Yes.
like a stepping stone, right? And in terms of like difficulties are very important in Mythras. You don't have to necessarily say, like, how do I say it? Like before your players even try it,
This role's going to be formidable.
exactly.
Oh,
Just wait till
yeah.
they try it. Just wait till they just like,
Yeah.
there's a trap, it's like, oh, watch out, there's a trap there. It's formidable. It's like, just wait till they spring the trap and then tell them roll evade at formidable.
Yeah. And would you give the description to sort of like allow them to estimate how difficult things are?
For sure. So the best way to do that, it may be a little bit more difficult for traps because they're supposed to not be
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah.
But the best way to, do that is to have, something in the world showing like, hey, there's some hints that these are happening, or have maybe the easiest way is to have an NPC there to be like, that gap's really long. Many have tried to cross it. Only like the greatest heroes could make that leap, something like that. And even if you wanted to, the nice thing about Mithras's difficulty grades is they're kind of natural language, like hard, formidable, Herculean,
Yeah.
or easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so.
So you could use that.
Do you think the mechanics can actually impinge the in role playing characters? Can it be something that goes against it or not?
I will say there is sort of a danger with the more complicated a game is to how difficult it is to role play, but I would not say that even with Mythras has like a crunchy reputation that it is any sort of impossibility or even difficulty because literally what are you doing to role play? You say where you are, what you're doing, and then if you say anything, what you say, right? And then after you do that, then you can figure out, okay, how are the dice going to decide what's going to happen here? I had in this PDF things like you want a unified dice mechanic, which Mythras does,
Yeah.
the D100. If you have games that are like constantly using different kinds of dice for like the same things, like well, this skill uses this die and this skill uses this die, it can be
Yeah.
it can be sort of an impediment. Um, a lot of the time people can be confused with Mythras with its combat rounds. Like you have the
Yeah.
round and you have the cycle and like how does that work? I don't think that impedes roleplay at all, but it just takes some time. The players have to understand it. As with any game. Sometimes in some games I'll play, I won't use initiative at all. Some games I'll play, I will literally everything is in initiative order. Like you start the game, roll initiative. That's the order everyone's gonna go in the round robin, right?
Yeah.
Just to keep it in that flow, and no one's like it can keep sort of cross table talk down, right? Yeah.
That's really interesting because one of the things I play on a virtual tabletop, as you know, but one of the things I really like about the wonderful character sheet that Digital Pagan makes for there is that you put in the dice rolls at the beginning, but then you just press a button. And so it's sort of like you don't need to think about what damage the longsword is going to do.
Exactly.
You just press the button. So it's not so. And I know, especially in 5th edition, I always got bogged down with the how many D plus this or that, or 10D6 minus 4 or something like that. And I really like the idea. It's just sort of like click, just roll damage, rather than anything else. I get the feeling that this sort of like improves the storytelling, the narration of the session. Yeah, is that something that you find happens?
Yes. So I was talking about movies earlier. They're different from RPGs in the fact that you're having a story told to you. It's showing you everything. Another sort of unique trait of RPGs or TTRPGs is that you can imagine it how you want. So the description that's given to you is the description. It's like the input, but your brain is the GPU. It does all the processing. It's going to make something completely different than the guy right next to you, and that's okay. You don't have to have everything exactly the same, but it's all going to look cinematic to every single player because they're thinking about their ideal version of the events that are happening. So if you're focused on just the description, but not too descriptive. Like you don't need to go on a whole. I know some advice some people give is like you need to hit all 5 senses, but it's like that's not necessarily for every single thing.
Yeah, especially taste.
Yeah, you taste the salty air. It's like GM, it's been salty for the past 5 sessions.
Yeah, that is so true.
But it allows you to, no matter what the description is, you can envision it in sort of that cinematic mode, focusing on what they immediately see with your descriptions. You don't need to describe what's behind the hidden door. Not that most people would, but it's like, oh, there's something hidden here. You don't have to tell them that. They can look for it. And going along with that, the combat can, even though I would say I love Mythras combat. It's my favorite. It's the reason why I play Mythras.
Yeah.
I will concede some people it's more complicated than some other games where it's like I roll and did this much damage, right? But that's good. I love it. I love all descriptors that the dice give me to describe the combat. And so just using that and describing it, what the players see or the characters see, it will give it that real big punch. And I think one big thing that playing in character does, since you're not thinking from the bird's eye view, you're thinking from the character's view, is it makes the chaos of combat really come to life. Like if I'm playing and, Joey over there 10 meters away gets slashed in the leg, I'm fighting the guy right in front of me. I don't really know that. I might be, the theist healer, right? I have to go help him, but I don't know.
You don't know. Yeah. I was just, while you were talking then, I was just imagining a scenario in a recent game that we played, and I was switching from the bird's eye view to an NPC's view, and how different it actually is, and what you can see through that NPC's eyes, rather than thinking about tokens on the board, hiding behind corners and things like that. And it changed the whole scenario, while as the GM I was looking through my NPC's eyes to see what they actually see, but also what they hear, as well. And what happens when things go wrong?
As they always do.
Yeah.
Do you mean when things go wrong in terms of like in the game, like the characters are having something bad happen, or things go wrong at the table? Okay. I mean, in the recent game we played, we had like 3 fumbles, one after another, and the party actually, it was all to do with influence and willpower. They decided that they're not the best interrogators at all, but how does, I almost like feel that the players, they have more ownership of that failure. And that's actually something that is actually really good to get your players to describe their failures. Because what's funny is us as GMs, we want to treat them with kid gloves as much as we say we don't want to. We end up doing that a little bit. But if you let the players describe their failures, they'll sometimes go way further than you ever would. And it gives them that ownership, like you were saying. And something you said earlier is also very important, like way earlier in this interview, when you said that you should roll first and describe afterwards. I'm saying you should do something in character, give a very short description. Like if I want to, since Mythras has such detailed combat mechanics, if I want to attack somebody, I would say, I grab my sword and I thrust at Joe Schmo, right? I wouldn't describe any of where I'm aiming, any of that, until after I rolled, right? And then when things go bad, because you didn't go on this, soliloquy about how good you are at swinging this sword or composing this argument, then you can, describe after the fact. And then sometimes it's also really funny to give your players the ability to sort of, sometimes you'll give a good argument, but the only reason that argument would sort of fumble is if there was some way out of whack thing happening for them to describe that. Give them that ownership. Like, I know they're players, they're the master of their character, but it's also okay for you to share the world, right? And it's like, I give this argument, and then, I saw a man off to the side in a dark robe giving him a look. Yeah. You at the GM can decide what that means, but
exactly. And it's interesting because the more we talk, the more I'm viewing things in character. And I was just thinking about locks and picking locks, and there's a huge difference between I'll try to pick the lock and I'll kneel down in front of the door and spread out my lock picks on the floor and try to pick it. Even with that description, it gives so much more
Exactly.
to the action, because I know that character is knelt down. I know their lockpicks are their eyes going to be level with that keyhole, you know, and at the same time, and you mentioned it earlier, they're not aware of what's happening behind them. You know,
Yeah, they're focused.
yeah, and they might hear a noise, but then it's that character's, you know, can they maintain their willpower, you know, and
Exactly.
just focus on
And
that.
imagine, say, that player's alone picking that lock, you know, and say there's some guy coming behind him. In, you know,
Yeah,
in other games, you might describe, you know, a mook sneaks up behind you. But in this sort of style, you wouldn't describe that. You would say you hear footsteps
yes,
stamping towards you, and they're like, "Oh,
yeah.
well, what am I going to do about that?" And one thing that I also wanted to say, and well, actually, I'll save it for when I'm talking about how players can maximize their role play.
Yeah. So, and one of the things I was going to say, one of the things I love about our virtual tabletop is that when dynamic lighting is in, as your character moves, it just opens up what they can see, you know, where their torch is shining. So they can't see round corners. And
Exactly.
Roll20 has just set up something new that it's only when you get close to things that tokens will appear. You know, so the room might look absolutely empty, but as you move to the corner, you know, especially if it's a big room, rubble might appear or things, monsters might appear. So I think it really adds to the environment because the players can't see everything to start off with. It's you have to move to see. So the classic case is that you can now go under bridges, you know, so as you get closer to it, the bridge, the opacity changes and you can go under,
That's
but
neat.
you can't see what's under
Hmm.
unless you go under or you can see on level with it. So you mentioned I'm hooked on this now and my brain is going in overdrive at the moment, but I'm a GM. So what happens if you're a player? What can you do to maximize this in character role play?
All right. So the first thing, and Mythras is already kind of a step ahead of some other game systems, is you have to separate the mechanics of your character from the personality of your character concept. That's literally the first thing in the Mythras core rulebook. It says, come up with a concept. All right. Your
Concept, yeah.
character is not going to be Joe Schmo fighter number 12. All right.
Yeah,
You come up with some
exactly.
distinct personality traits, and really important are goals and motivations and interests, which your passions can help you with that. But you can also just have a goal, you know, like this is what my character wants, right? And then a brief history. You don't need you do not need a super long backstory,
No,
right? It's
please,
much
no.
better to not have that. But that's sort of preparatory, you know, before the game. What about in the
Yeah,
game? One thing that we've kind of this term that some of me and my buddies use is anchoring. And that's that thing where I was saying you say where your character is, what your character does, and if anything, what your character says. I I would say preferably in that order, but a lot of the time when you're having a conversation, you'll usually describe what you say first and then what you do. But it's
yeah,
not really important the order. Um, but that will keep you from having sort of a whole group and they're just talking back and forth, which, you know, is important in role playing, but you can feel kind of disconnected from the world when you have a long conversation happening. But
yeah.
when you just you know, you're at a dinner table having lunch or having dinner with the king or something like that, you know, I sit up straight and I very courteously slice my food in front of me
Yeah,
and you know, I eat it. You know, you're describing how you, this is a much different conversation than you and your buddy at the campfire,
yeah.
you know, and
And
then it helps you.
and even a lot different from I roll my courtesy roll
Yeah,
to see
yeah,
how
very
well
different. I courtesy the king.
yeah. I love this. I do like that turn idea that you mentioned earlier, and it's just sort of like it's constantly passing round, and that also gives that time to players, doesn't it? So they can think, oh, what's my character going to be doing, as we go around. I like that. What about one of the things that I find really difficult is that sometimes players go off topic and they start to talk out of character. And for me, there's nothing worse when I'm building this scene, and they go off topic. Is that something that is totally opposed in the in character, or is it something? How can we deal with that?
So you hit the nail on the head. If everything's perfect, in an ideal game session, there is no off-topic speak during the game session. Before the game session and after the game session, there's tons of off-topic. It's like, dude, when you did this, it made me think of this other movie, and it was so cool. Things like that.
Yeah.
And I would say, as an aside, that's having that like post-game discussion is very important to this in-character style, because that's one of the reasons we get together to play, is also to talk about like all this cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
But during the game session, try to keep it to an absolute minimum. Like if it's not required, which most of the time it's not, like if you're being realistic with yourself, then just don't do it, right? Sometimes you can make sort of a in-character joke, and those are honestly usually funnier. But if if I don't know, I'm walking down a pathway and like some animals are skittering down the side. It's like, is one of them a blue hedgehog? It's like, well, now it's like we're not in in whatever fantasy world we were in.
And that sort of like takes everybody out of that immersion and almost like breaks that cinematic storytelling for a while. Until I must admit, my players are often posting things in the Discord group chat that sort of like relates to these pop culture references, and because whenever I go in after, I don't have it up, but when I go in afterwards, there just seems to be all these gifs going, that have happened in there rather than sort of like in the game, which is brilliant. And you mentioned earlier on this idea of acting rather than asking.
Yeah, I mean, that's really I think that's the biggest difference, is when you're asking the GM, what about this? And then they tell you, okay, well, what about this? And then they tell you, okay, well, what about this? And the whole time your character is doing what? Just like T-posed in the middle of the plaza? Like nothing's happening. And so if you want to learn something, think about how you in real life how would you have to act to learn that thing, and then just do that. All right. Sometimes may take a little bit of practice from both the players and the GM to kind of get that flow going, and that's fine. Usually physical things are easier, like I've already used is the door locked, right? It's like, well, I don't know. How do you figure that out? Well, I try. I walk up to the door and try the handle. But more difficult things like sort of like lore and knowledge checks, right? How am I going to describe to the GM in character that I want to know what my character knows about this thing? And it's actually pretty simple. It sounds and it's actually not that different. So if we're talking about like out of character role play, you just turn to the GM. What do I know about gnolls? But if you're in character, say, I stroke my chin and I look up and I think about what I learned about gnolls when I was younger.
Yeah. I know our players often use, I think back to when I was
That's a great way to do it.
Animal law in the old dusty library back at the Abbey. Do I recall anything about them? And sort of like transforming back. It's really getting, I mean, in character is such a good description. It's almost like you are becoming the character, isn't it? It's as if you are almost like acting on the stage. And
Yeah, you're the real main character of the world.
yeah,
And
and
I would say with that description that you were giving, you were, I think back to when I learned about this in the library, and then your player asks at the end, "What do I recall?" You don't even have to say that. Like, you just say, "I think about this," and then you as the GM can either just tell them, because maybe it's something that they would obviously know, that the player themselves just don't remember, or you can have them roll. It's like, okay, roll, lore, whatever, right?
yeah, and even then they can add to that, and they can make up their their own character, their
hmm
own NPCs that
Exactly.
their teacher standing over the top of them, banging on the table with a small candle, encouraging them to read. And well, I was just thinking, what about emotions? Because those are really difficult, aren't they, in characters? But characters will be scared. They will be brave. They will be sad. Is that something that you encourage as well?
Yeah, so having that sort of emotional alignment between yourself and your character can really help with the immersion aspect there. And I would say sort of the things we've talked about already will help with that. One really common, unfortunately, game that I'll see is a horror game
Mm,
where everyone's cracking jokes the whole time and
yeah.
laughing. And it's like nobody at this table is scared.
Yes. Yeah.
But
And
if you're focused more on the in character and you're not having that out of character, pop culture references or anything like that, then it's a lot easier to get into that, oh my goodness, what is this thing that's stalking us? But you wouldn't ask that character or you wouldn't ask that question out of character. You would look to your friend and you would ask him that and they'd be like, I don't know.
yeah. And do you want to? And I might be wrong with this, but I think I'm on the right line. Horror games are not there to scare the players. Horror games are there to scare the characters.
I could say they could run both ways. I hope you
Yeah.
don't, invite all your friends to traumatize them. But
No, yeah.
if I'm reading a horror novel, I'm scared. If I'm
Yeah.
watching a horror movie, I'm scared. I'm not in that same situation. I'm sitting on my comfy couch. I'm not in
Mm,
any danger at all, but I'm terrified. Why can't we
yeah.
have that same feeling, that same experience at the game table?
Yeah, it's almost if everybody is contributing to it, that atmosphere can be created. But as soon as people, including the GM, steps out of it and
Mhm.
sort of like start, oh, remember when? Or did you watch this on telly?
Yeah,
That then sort of like breaks it, and
exactly.
we're going back to having to recreate it.
hmm
I, I, I do like this. I do really like it. So, as a conclusion, if people have listened to this like me and they're thinking, right, I want to do this both as a GM and or a player, what would you recommend to be the next steps?
So the first thing is that it has to be the whole table that's wanting to do this. Like you're saying about that horror type thing, it's okay if everyone wants to play a comedic horror game. They should do that. But if everyone wants to play, a horrifying horror game, everyone needs to be on board.
Yeah.
It's collaborative between the GMs and the players. And the goal is not to tell a story, a specific one, but to create characters that can then partake in some story. Something's going to happen. As long as
Yeah.
everyone is acting in good faith in their characters, then some amazing story is going to happen. It's okay, as the GM, you're going to have some things prepared. I have this villain, I have this merchant, and things like that. But, just roll with what makes sense at the moment, and being in character will help you do that. And then
Mm,
the last thing is you should just practice.
Yeah.
It can be kind of intimidating to show up for this is also something I didn't really bring up, but I used to play 4 hours, maybe 5 hours in my sessions, and I would feel if it was under 4 hours, like if it was a 3 hour session, I was like, man, we didn't get anything done. It felt like it was a little bit short. I now play like 2 hour sessions and get way more done, like way more done. But
Yeah.
even for a 2 hour session, it can be kind of intimidating to show up and it's like, what if we mess it up right away? That's a lot of time that we have planned. Just, get together for like a no prep session where we're going to play for 30 minutes and we're going to practice, and then afterward communicate and think like what went well, what kind of disrupted things like that, and figure out what works for your table because it really isn't the same for everybody.
And it really sort of like, I love this idea of making these believable characters, and actually creating these characters that have depth and memorable. I think that, and that's the sort of character I would want to play.
Exactly.
It almost like people watching would almost like would get used to what that character would be doing because they were so believable, in that sense. It's absolutely fantastic. I really do adore it. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And I'm sure if anybody's got any more questions, they can hit you up in the Discord.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I did actually want to say, just kind of at the tail end, when you have believable characters, that means there's probably going to be friction sometimes between the characters. Never ever let there be like player versus player, like I hate that guy, he's not doing what I want. But in character, you can have that sort of friction as long as everyone agrees beforehand. Focus on character versus character things happening.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You have inspired and enlightened me, and I'm really looking forward to implementing it. So thank you for coming on Mythras Matters.
Thanks for having me.
That's it. Another episode of Mythras Matters completed. Don't forget you can check out all my content by following my YouTube channel and the campaign areas on World Anvil. And a huge thanks to everyone who has bought digital products from my online shop. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to check out the Discord and the Tapper Talk forums. There's some great people there sharing their ideas within discussions. So until the next time, have a great month of gaming, everyone, and I will chat to you all in November. Until then, I hope all your opposed roles succeed and provide you with a well-deserved special. Thanks for listening, everyone. See ya. Bye. The content of this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license, so please give appropriate credit if you are sharing or copying any part of this podcast. Thank you. If you're still listening, I just want to say a huge thanks to everybody who volunteered to be part of the online games I've been running over the past couple of months. Whether or not you've been a new player or an experienced player, I have had so much joy GMing for you. I have learned so much, and you are just fantastic. I hope to continue to the GMing with you all in your own little campaigns, but to all you people, thank you.